Hello and welcome to Inside Indiana Business 2013. I'm Gary Dick. Hard to believe, but Inside Indiana Business has been on the air for some 15 years now. For the next 60 minutes, we will bring back some of our very first guests from our inaugural shows and others to reminisce and reflect on the Indiana economy. When the show made its debut May 1, 1998, the big business news making headlines in Indiana involved banking. The merger of the two largest banks in the state of Indiana. Indeed, Bank One and First Chicago NBD recently announcing a nearly $30 billion merger that would create the largest bank in the Midwest. And the heads of both NBD and Bank One in Indiana, Joe Barnett of Bank One, Andy Payne, NBD, have been kind enough to join us on Indiana Business this week. Well, joining me now with some perspectives on banking back then and how things have changed really dramatically for consumers and businesses alike, I'm pleased to be joined by Star Financial Bank's CEO, Jim Marcuccilli. Jim is also the current chairman of the Indiana Bankers Association, and Jim, as always, welcome to the program. In terms of, we were talking off camera, Bank One, NBD, you think about American Fletcher National Bank and Merchants and Indiana National, all those old names that existed way back then. A lot has changed. You mentioned the Star Financial, the mergers back then in '98 prompted you to move from Marion, right?
It had a big effect on us. We were situated in Marion, directly between Fort Wayne and Indianapolis. At that time, the First Chicago NBD sale to Bank One occurred. Shortly thereafter, within less than 9 months, Wells Fargo acquires Northwest, and then Fort Wayne National Bank, who was the largest player in Northeast Indiana, they sell to National City. And that left a big void for community banks in Northeast Indiana, and we made a decision to move our corporate offices to Fort Wayne. Yeah, in terms of the changing landscape, interesting and this is going all the way back to 1980. There were 600 banks and thrifts headquartered in Indiana, now about 130. A number of out-of-state operations as well. You look at assets and deposits, they really haven't changed much, but because the landscape has changed, the Indiana banks have really kind of stepped up to fill the void. That's true. That's what's happened, is that even though the acquisitions have been from out-of-state competitors, the competition has actually gotten stronger for the state in terms of players vying for people's individual wealth as well as their financial needs.
How would you gauge the Indiana banking landscape today? Is it better today than it was back then? Worse? How would you compare that landscape back in '98 to present day?
Well, I would think the landscape-wise is about the same. I mean, when you think '98 was just prior to a recessionary period, and a lot of manufacturing left the state in early 2001, 2, and 3. And then 4 years later, we go through another recession. The difference today is the state is much stronger, and we've actually got an influx of employment and population coming in. So in a lot of ways, it hasn't changed a lot, but at the same time, we're much better off today because we're prepared for another downturn.
The industry, you talk about jobs in the banking and the financial industry has changed, though, with the mergers and things. A lot fewer people in the industry.
Well, banking is really no different than whether you're in agriculture or manufacturing. Automation plays a big role in everybody's output and productivity, and so as the automation has occurred within our industry, obviously there's fewer and fewer jobs that are available today. Interesting, the term smart banking and what it meant in 1998 versus today, a big difference. Yeah, big difference. Back in 1998, a smart card was what everybody talked about, that we would all have these little chips that would sit inside our credit cards and it would monitor what we did. Today, smart is what's inside that mobile application of your telephone or your iPad, and so big difference. Yeah. As you look going forward, this is obviously a very competitive landscape. Regulation, I know, is a very tough issue for the industry and others as well. But as you look at issues facing the Indiana banking industry going forward, what are those big challenges? Well, the big challenges will be regulatory change, and currently we don't know what that's going to be. We have a general idea what's coming out of Washington, but when the Dodd-Frank law was passed, it was not really a piece of legislation that said this is what's going to happen. It was basically a piece of legislation that says we're going to let somebody rewrite the rules, so then you'll find out how you're going to play later on. Yeah. And so we're still adapting to that change. But in terms of Indiana and the legislative body of Indiana, it's treated the banking industry very good. Great. One of the top bankers in the state, Jim Marcuccilli, CEO of Star Financial. Thanks for joining us. Thank you so much.